At 16 years old, he had already dropped out of school, left home, and run out of money in New York City. By 21, he had successfully impersonated a Pan Am airline pilot, a licensed medical doctor, and a qualified lawyer in 3 completely different states, while cashing over $2.5 million in fraudulent checks across 26 countries. His name was Frank Abagnale Jr. He was not operating inside some sophisticated criminal organization. He had no mentor, no forger, no backup team, just an extraordinary capacity for confidence, research, and reading exactly what people wanted to see from him, and then becoming it with complete conviction. This is one of the most remarkable stories of identity and deception in the 20th century. And the most unsettling part of all, Frank Abagnale Jr. was eventually caught, convicted, and then hired by the FBI. The same agency that spent years hunting him across the globe ended up paying him to teach them how he did it. This is that story. Welcome back to Plain English Guide. Today's story is one of the most extraordinary true crime cases of the 20th century. A teenager who became a ghost, moving through institutions that should have caught him at every turn. Names and specific details are drawn from documented accounts of Frank Abagnale Jr.'s life. Let's get into it. Frank William Abagnale Jr. was born in 1948 in Bronxville, New York. His father was a respected local businessman, a stationer who doted on Frank and saw enormous potential in his son's sharp mind and natural charisma. Frank adored his father, and when his parents' marriage collapsed and his mother left when Frank was 12, something fundamental shifted in how he saw the world. At 16, after struggling through his parents' divorce and dropping out of high school, Frank left home with nothing but confidence and one observation that would define the next 5 years of his life: that people see what they expect to see, not what is actually there. If you look the part, carry yourself with certainty, and answer questions with calm authority, most people will simply believe you. His first and most famous impersonation began with a simple observation. Pilots were treated with extraordinary deference everywhere they went: hotels, restaurants, airports. People held doors, offered upgrades, asked no questions. Frank researched Pan Am's uniform specifications, ordered a replica through legitimate channels by claiming to be a pilot who had lost his uniform, and walked into a Pan Am recruitment office to request a company ID. With the uniform and a forged FAA pilot's license, Frank deadheaded, flying free in the cockpit, jump seat as airline protocol allowed, on over 250 flights across the country and internationally over the following 2 years. He never actually flew a plane himself. He simply sat in the cockpit, maintained the confident bearing of a seasoned professional, and let everyone's assumptions do the rest. Alongside the pilot impersonation, Frank had developed a sophisticated check fraud operation. He would alter the routing numbers on legitimate checks to redirect funds to accounts he controlled, then cash them before the fraud was detected. He opened accounts in multiple states under different names, moved constantly, and by the time any single bank flagged an issue, he was already 2 cities ahead of the investigation. Over approximately 5 years, Frank is estimated to have cashed between $2 and $2.5 million in fraudulent checks across 26 countries. The FBI later said his check fraud operation was so sophisticated that it became a case study, used to train bank investigators for years after his eventual capture. After his pilot identity became too risky, Frank relocated to Atlanta, Georgia, and reinvented himself entirely. He forged a medical degree from Columbia University, applied for a residency position at a hospital, and was accepted. For nearly a year he worked as a supervising pediatric resident, overseeing the work of actual, qualified doctors who assumed his credentials were genuine. He has said in interviews that he never directly treated patients himself, always delegating actual medical decisions to the qualified residents under the pretense of teaching them to think independently. Whether the full extent of this impersonation is exactly as described has been debated. What is documented is that he held a hospital position under a false medical identity for a significant period before quietly leaving when he began to feel the risk closing in. From Atlanta, Frank moved to Louisiana and reinvented himself a 3rd time. He forged a Harvard law degree and passed the Louisiana bar examination after studying genuinely for weeks. He was hired by the Louisiana State Attorney General's office as a lawyer, a position he held for several months before a Harvard-educated colleague, began asking questions about specific professors and coursework that Frank could not convincingly answer. Before any formal investigation could begin, Frank simply disappeared, as he had done at each previous identity. He left his apartment, his car, and everything else behind, and reappeared weeks later in a new city, with a new name and a new role already being constructed. He had become extraordinarily good at the part he played most consistently, the man who was never quite where you thought he was. By the late 1960s, the FBI had assembled a dedicated team to track Frank across state and international lines. The case was complicated by the sheer number of identities he had used, the different jurisdictions involved, and the fact that many of his victims, banks, hospitals, employers, were reluctant to publicize how thoroughly they had been deceived. He was eventually identified and arrested in France in 1969. Recognized by a flight attendant who had previously encountered him during his Pan Am days. He spent time in French, Swedish, and then American custody before being extradited to the United States, where he faced 12 years of fraud charges across multiple states. Frank served approximately 5 years of his sentence before being released on the condition that he work with the FBI without compensation to help them understand and combat check fraud and identity impersonation. He agreed. And what began as a condition of his release became a decades-long career as one of the most in-demand fraud consultants in the world. He went on to found a fraud consultancy company, lectured extensively for the FBI and major corporations, and was the inspiration for the 2002 Steven Spielberg film Catch Me If You Can, starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks. The man who had spent 5 years evading law enforcement spent the next 50 years helping them. It is worth noting that some investigative journalists and researchers have questioned the full extent of Frank's story, suggesting certain details, particularly around the medical and legal impersonations, may have been embellished over time. Frank has always maintained the core accuracy of his account. Whatever the precise details, the documented check fraud operation and the confirmed impersonations represent one of the most extraordinary cases of identity crime in American history. What does Frank Abagnale Jr.'s story teach us? Lesson 1. Institutions are often only as secure as their willingness to verify what they assume. Every organization that Frank penetrated, Pan Am, the hospital, the law firm, had systems in place that should have caught him. But those systems depended on someone actually checking, and the confidence he projected made checking feel unnecessary. Lesson 2. Confidence is not the same as competence, but it is often treated as if it is. Frank's greatest skill was never forgery. It was the ability to make the people around him feel certain that he belonged exactly where he was standing. In every professional environment, this remains one of the most exploited gaps between what we see and what is actually true. Lesson 3. The same psychological vulnerabilities Frank exploited in the 1960s still exist today. Online identity fraud, impersonation scams, and fake credential schemes operate on exactly the same principle, the assumption that confidence plus presentation equals legitimacy. Understanding how this works is the first step toward not being fooled by it. Frank Abagnale Jr. is now in his 70s. He has been married to the same woman for over 50 years and has 3 sons. He has said in interviews that he is deeply ashamed of the person he was, and that the work he has done since his release has been a genuine attempt to make amends. Whether you believe every detail of his story or not, the psychology behind it remains one of the most fascinating studies in human perception ever documented. Hit subscribe for more real stories. See you Monday. This video is based on documented accounts of Frank Abagnale Jr.'s life. Some details have been disputed by investigative journalists. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only.